Okay.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Venerable Sangye Khadro. So I just take up the opportunity to thank you, you know, for accepting to teach, even if yesterday we had some problems. But thank you very much, because I know you have a very busy schedule, and maybe we can offer you a mandala. What do you think? Okay.
Well, do you think the people attending the course are new people who are not familiar with such rituals and they would find it strange, or do you think it's okay?
What do you think, Arno? Because
I think that's okay. I mean, we can maybe say
still good
two
for
words
us anyway, you know.
Yeah, and maybe say 2 words to explain what it is, and then just do it. Yeah. But it's mainly an offering to the Venerable Sangye Khadro as a teacher, so also to the Dharma.
Yeah.
And it's offering the whole universe, so it's a very wide offering. And I'm going to project the text so that everyone can see.
Long one or short one?
Short one.
We'll do a short one, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sajipe ki juchi meto tramri rablingji ni degen padi Sangye Jindu Mikte Uwai Dokunam Dajingla Chupasho Idam Guat Namandala Kameyatayami.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so are we ready to start?
I think so.
Okay, so hello everybody, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to discuss a really important topic, compassion. So I want to thank Elizabeth and Kalachakra Center for inviting me to do this course, and I really am sorry for what happened last night. We don't normally have such problems with our internet, but something happened. So yeah, I think the whole morning here in Washington, they were working to fix it, and they finally got it fixed right after we finished our course. Hopefully it's fixed now and we won't have any problems today. Okay, so I thought to start with some meditation, and we'll first just spend a few minutes settling down and getting our minds more calm and clear and settled in the present. We'll generate a motivation, and then we'll do a slightly longer meditation on the breath, and also one of the other exercises that Thupten Jinpa includes in his book. He calls it spacious mind, and it's quite similar to a meditation that Lama Yeshe used to teach us on the clear nature of the mind. So I thought that would be a nice practice to do to start today, get our minds really open and clear and spacious. Okay, so I invite you to sit comfortably, find a comfortable position, but being comfortable doesn't mean lying down or slouching. So it's always good when we meditate to keep our back straight. Try to have a straight back, whether you're sitting on the floor, cross-legged, or you're sitting in a chair, try to have a straight back. And the rest of the body should be as relaxed as possible, not tight or tense. Let your shoulders relax. That's a place where we often hold onto tension. So if there is any tension in your shoulders or your back, see if you can let that tension go. Let it melt and flow away. And do the same with the other parts of your body. Imagine that if there is any tension anywhere in your body, from the top of your head to your toes and fingertips, imagine all that tension melting, dissolving, flowing out of you and sinking into the ground below. And then, just for a few moments, be aware of your breath coming in and going out in order to settle down your mind, because you may have thoughts in your mind about things that you did earlier today or last week or any time in the past. So let go of or put aside all thoughts of the past and just be right here in the present moment. And also if there's any thoughts of the future, like what you're going to do later, today, tonight, tomorrow, next week, put those thoughts aside as well. Just let your awareness be right here in the present moment, present place, just being aware of your breathing coming in and going out. And before we continue with the meditation, let's bring into our mind a positive, altruistic motivation for being here, participating in this session. So I'm going to recite a short prayer that's used in the Tibetan tradition, called the Prayer of the Four Immeasurable Thoughts. So these are four very positive states of mind: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So we try to cultivate these states of mind towards all living beings. And this short prayer is a reminder of those thoughts, an aid to cultivating those thoughts. So I'll just recite it and pay attention to the words and try to generate in your own mind the thoughts associated with these words. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion that hold some close and keep others distant. So really try to have these positive thoughts, wishes for all living beings. And then connect that with what we're doing here today. This course, meditating, listening, thinking about, trying to understand these teachings on compassion. Really try to have the wish that doing this will help you to have more compassion, more love, more positive thoughts, feelings, attitudes towards other beings, so that you can help them as much as you can in your life and not harm them as much as possible. Really try to have that wish that you will learn something in this course that will bring that about. So with that as your motivation, return your attention to your breathing and just be aware of the breath as it's coming in and going out without doing anything to control your breathing. There's no need to do that because your body knows how to breathe on its own. It doesn't need to be controlled. So just let go of any tendency to control and allow your body to breathe naturally. And then with your mind, your awareness, just be aware or observe the breath as it's coming in and going out, coming in, going out, one breath after another. And at any time you notice that your mind is wandered away from the breath and is doing something else, like thinking about something, remembering something, planning something, distracted by a noise, whatever, anything that isn't the breath. Once you realize that, let go of or put aside that other thought, that other object, and return your attention to the breathing. And don't worry if you have to keep doing this again and again. It's normal for our mind to get distracted and for us to have to bring it back to the breath. So try not to get frustrated or upset at yourself. Just be calm and patient. Keep bringing your awareness back to your breath whenever it wanders away. So now we're going to move into a slightly different kind of meditation of the nature of the mind. So imagine that your mind is like the sky or like space. You could think of what the sky looks like on a day when it's completely clear and there's no clouds or pollution, just this vast, clear, pure, spacious sky. And understand that the real nature of your mind is like that, is like the sky, in the sense that it's vast and spacious and naturally clear or pure. Buddhism says the nature of our mind is actually pure. And all the thoughts and emotions and memories and all the things that happen in our mind are impermanent or transitory. So they can be compared to clouds. Clouds come and go in the sky. They're not permanent parts of the sky. They just appear when there are certain conditions in the atmosphere. They're not solid. They're insubstantial. They change, move across the sky, and eventually disappear. So it's similar with our thoughts and memories and emotions. They appear in our mind when there are certain conditions. They are insubstantial, not solid, and they are not permanent. They're not always there. They come and they go, they disappear. And they don't harm the clear nature of our mind in the same way that clouds do not harm the spaciousness of the sky. That remains, that's always there. Just for a few moments, few minutes, try to get that sense of your mind being like the clear sky, and your thoughts and other mental experiences are things that come and go like clouds. So don't take them so seriously. Don't give them too much attention. Just watch them come and watch them go, and try to stay within that clear, spacious nature of your mind, like clear sky. Okay, so you can open your eyes and come out of that meditation. So this idea or teaching in Buddhism about our mind being naturally clear and pure like the sky is a really wonderful thing, because it means there's a lot of potential. Our mind has a huge potential, a lot of possibilities. We can change our mind. We don't have to just be stuck with our mind the way it often is, with just a lot of crazy thoughts coming and going. I mean, that does happen, but that's not our real nature. It's not the real nature of our mind. Okay, so I'm going to begin the talk now. We'll continue with where we left off yesterday, last night. And I would also like to ask that, yeah, if you do have questions, you can write them in the chat box, but I suggest you wait till later in the session rather than as soon as you have the question, then you start writing in the chat box, because then you might miss something that I'm saying. Yeah, so just try to just stay attentive to what I'm saying, because it's also possible your question will get answered. Yeah, if you just keep listening to what I'm saying, so you can hang on to your question and then put it in the chat box later. And also, I received a few questions from last night, but I haven't had time to read them yet. One of them is quite long. So I'll read those during the break and then hopefully have an answer for the next session. And also I would like to ask you not to use the chat box for chatting, just saying hi to people, but try to behave as if you are in a center, you're in the meditation hall. You come in and sit down and pay attention to what the teacher's saying, and you don't kind of chat with each other. So try to do that during the session. Maybe during the break, if you want, you can say hi to each other, but try not to do that during the session itself. Try to stay attentive to what we're doing. Okay, so last night, I began talking about what compassion is. And according to Buddhism, it's the wish for others to be free of suffering, wishing either one being or many beings or all beings to be free from suffering. And it's a little different from love. Love is wishing them to be happy, wishing one or more beings to have happiness, and compassion is wishing them to be free of suffering. So the Dalai Lama said there are actually two aspects of the same thing. We might think of them as two sides of a coin. So they're a little bit different, but they're kind of inseparable. So I'd like to carry on now with the material. And the next point we're looking at, letter C, is compassion natural? So the first bullet point says, are human beings selfish and aggressive, or are they kind and compassionate? So in Western countries, starting in the 18th century, philosophers and scientists, psychologists had this idea that human beings are basically violent and selfish and competitive and always fighting with each other. So this was the predominant view of human beings. And I have some friends who are psychoanalysts, and they told me that this was actually Freud's view. Freud, kind of the founder of, not the only one, but one of the founders of psychology. And his view of human nature was like that, we're just aggressive and greedy and not very positive at all. But this was the predominant view. And some of you in your studies may have encountered this view of human nature. But in recent decades, scientists are starting to recognize that there are positive qualities such as empathy, caring, and cooperation, and even compassion, that these are natural parts of human nature. And this is very much in accordance with Buddhism. According to Buddhism, Buddhism certainly acknowledges that human beings have negative emotions like anger and greed and selfishness, pride and aggressiveness. So we're not denying that. But Buddhism says we have very positive emotions as well, and that these are part of our nature. In Buddhism, we talk about Buddha nature. Every being, every single sentient being actually has Buddha nature. And Buddha nature includes positive qualities like love, compassion, and altruism, and generosity, patience. So we have these qualities already there within us, part of our nature. And in some people, maybe they're more weak and the negative qualities are more strong. But everybody does have these positive qualities, and it's possible to cultivate these positive qualities and grow them more and more and more, and overcome the negative qualities, and even become completely free from the negative qualities. So Buddhism says we have incredible potential. And in the book by Geshe Jinpa, A Fearless Heart, he mentions some experiments that have been done on very small children, even as young as 6 months old. And so they do these experiments to see if children have a natural sense of compassion and caring. So one experiment, I actually saw videos of this. There was a person who was trying to do something, some simple task like hanging clothes on a clothesline, and then they dropped the clothespin on the ground and they couldn't reach it. And this little child was there, and the little child would go up and pick up the clothespin and hand it to the person. And they did this without being asked to do it by anybody. So it was just coming from their side. They saw that there was somebody in need, and they responded to that just naturally, spontaneously. They helped this person in need. And there was another experiment that was done with very young children, like 6 months old. They can't even walk yet. And they showed them a puppet show. And in the puppet show, there was one puppet who was trying to do something like open a box or something simple. And another puppet came and helped them open the box. So the second puppet showed helping behavior. But then at another point in time, the first puppet was trying to open the box, and another puppet came along and jumped on top of the box, stopping the first puppet from being able to open the box. And so then after showing the child this little puppet show, they would ask the child to choose one of the puppets, which puppet they would like to have. And most of the children chose the puppet that was helping, that showed helping behavior rather than the puppet that was showing the harmful behavior. So these are small children who can't speak, and also their, knowledge is still very limited, but they showed this attraction towards helping behavior rather than harming behavior. So the scientists, the researchers, felt this was a sign that even very, very, very young children, toddlers, infants, they do show attraction to compassionate behavior, which shows that they must have that quality within themselves already. So there's a quotation here from the Fearless Heart saying, compassion is fundamental to our basic nature as human beings. So this is very much the Buddhist view. His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about it again and again and again and again. And yeah, I put a picture here of parents with a baby, because this is probably the best example of kindness and compassion. When people bring a child into the world, and of course there are some cases of parents who are not kind to their child. Sometimes they neglect the child, sometimes there's even abuse. But I do think that that is not normal. I think that's the exception, that's rare. And in most cases, parents do really do the best they can to take care of their children, especially when the child is very small. And of course, they're human beings, so they have their problems. They get impatient, they have their needs, they get frustrated. So that's just normal. But His Holiness often talks about how he has learned from scientists that if a child does not receive love and kindness and attention, they won't even be able to grow up. They won't even survive. And so just the fact that there are, I don't know how many human beings now in the world, 8 billion or something. The fact that there are 8 billion human beings who are alive in the world shows that they did receive kindness and care and love when they were infants. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived. We wouldn't still be alive. And so even if we don't receive it from our parents, then we receive it from other people, grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings, caregivers. So there's always caregivers taking care of small children, and that enables us to survive and grow up and become adults. So this is something for you to think about, yeah? Is compassion and these other positive qualities, are these natural qualities in human beings? And I do think they are, even though, you know, there are times for all of us when we get angry and we may even do harmful things, but that doesn't destroy our compassion. Anger and harmfulness are temporary, like the clouds in the sky, like a storm, you know, they come, but they go, they pass. And our compassion, our love is still there, still possible to come out of us. Okay, the next point, letter D, is the difference between empathy and compassion. Okay, so this is a question that people sometimes have, and I think there's also a lot of discussion about it among professionals, healthcare workers, psychologists, therapists, and so on. What is empathy? What is compassion? Are they the same? Are they different? And there's probably many different opinions about this, and even different ways of explaining what exactly is empathy, what exactly is compassion. So I will just follow what the book says, the book Fearless Heart. according to that book, empathy is feeling for or feeling with other people and understanding their feelings. Okay, so Thupten Jinpa in his book says, empathy is our natural ability to understand others' feelings and share in their experience. It has two key components. One is an emotional response to someone's feelings. So we are affected by the feelings of others. We respond emotionally to others' feelings. And there's also a cognitive understanding of the situation, what is going on with the other person. And so my understanding of that is empathy it's a natural quality we all have, and it enables us to understand what is going on with another person. I've actually heard, I'm not a scientist, but I've heard that in neuroscience, they talk about mirror neurons. So, brain cells, neurons that enable us to mirror what another person is feeling. And again, I've heard they do experiments with very young children, infants, tiny babies. So if one baby starts to cry, another baby in the same room or nearby will also start to cry. Probably heard about that. You probably experienced that as well. You've been around small children. Yeah, so it's a natural human quality to pick up on another person, another being's feelings, and have similar feelings ourselves. And so this can happen with all kinds of feelings. So when we see somebody who is sad, we will feel sad too. But if we see somebody happy, yeah, for example, when we see children and they're playing and they're looking really happy, really joyful, we probably feel happy as well. That brings some joy into our own heart. Okay, so we have a whole range of different feelings, and when we see some other person experiencing some feeling, we will have a similar feeling in ourselves. Okay, so empathy is the ability to know and to share the feelings of others. Okay, then compassion. Here it says, compassion arises from empathy when we understand that another person is suffering. Okay, so after having empathy, when we see another person is suffering, then we will feel some sadness, some natural feeling as well, similar to what they are feeling. And then compassion arises from that. So compassion is concern about the other person's suffering and wanting to relieve that suffering. So wanting to do something to relieve their suffering. Okay, so empathy, to me then, empathy is kind of wider, broader, because it concerns any kind of feeling, happy, unhappy. Whereas compassion is specifically when we observe unhappiness or pain or suffering or need. And then that kind of empathy will lead to compassion. So this is a difference between empathy and compassion. And research by neuroscientists confirm that there is a difference between the two in terms of our brain. So there's one researcher in Germany, Tanja Singer. She's the director of neuroscience at the Max Planck Institute for Human, Cognitive, and Brain Sciences in Leipzig, Germany. And she and her colleagues have done a lot of research on compassion. And one of the things they did was using MRI scanners to investigate brain activity. when a person is feeling compassion or when they're feeling empathy, then they, see what's going on in their brain. And this research has shown that compassion and empathy are two different phenomena associated with different brain activity patterns. And so what they find is that when we are thinking in a compassionate way, then we light up the same regions of the brain as love. But empathetic thinking, when we are thinking empathetically, this lights up regions of the brain associated with pain. So that must be when the person is thinking in an empathetic way about suffering rather than about joy. So Mathieu Ricard, who you've probably heard of, one of your countrymen, so he was one of the people involved in this research. He was one of the people who was inside the MRI and meditating on empathy and meditating on compassion. And so they were observing his brain while he was doing these two activities. And he wrote a book. There's this book in English. It's probably available in French as well. It's a really huge book on, I think it's called Altruism. It's all about compassion. And in that book, he talked about these experiments. And he said that when he was asked to meditate on empathy, he was asked to be inside the MRI machine for an hour, meditating on empathy. And he said he was thinking about suffering children and suffering people that he had seen. He'd seen like videos of these suffering people. So he spent an hour thinking about those people's suffering and feeling empathy for them. And he said his experience doing this was unbearable. It was terrible. He said he ended up feeling powerless and burned out. And then after that, he was asked to switch to compassion and meditate on compassion. And so then he spent an hour meditating on compassion for those same people, the children and the other people that he'd been thinking about. And he said his mind changed completely. When he switched from empathy to compassion, he said that instead of creating in me a feeling of distress and powerlessness that was hard to bear, I now felt a profound, heartwarming courage linked to limitless love for these people. Okay, so his experience was completely different. Instead of feeling powerless and distressed, he felt this incredible love for all these people. And he goes on to say, and it seems that one cannot tire of love and compassion. You don't get burned out. You don't get tired when you are feeling love and compassion. These states of mind fed my courage, and it reinforced my determination to help others without increasing my distress. So he said, it was clear from my perspective that if there was an empathy fatigue leading to the syndrome of emotional exhaustion, there was no fatigue of love and compassion. So I can share this article with you. It's just an extract from his book where he's talking about this difference between empathy and compassion and how empathy can drain us, whereas compassion energizes us. It gives us energy. So I think this information should be very helpful to healthcare workers, people who are working as doctors, nurses, therapists who are really dealing all day long with suffering people. and sometimes terrible suffering. And people doing that kind of work sometimes experience what they call burnout or fatigue. Sometimes it's so bad they even have to stop working. And this problem is sometimes called compassion fatigue or compassion burnout, but it seems that that is not a correct term. Instead, this kind of problem should be called empathy fatigue, empathy burnout, because they're feeling empathy, but not compassion. And if they have compassion, if they knew how to generate compassion rather than just empathy, then they would not get burned out. They would have a limitless amount of energy and ability to help. So I think at least in America, that this is starting to come into mainstream discussions and education for healthcare workers. And they're being offered training programs in compassion so that they can have more compassion rather than empathy. And in that way, they wouldn't be so likely to get burned out, and they would be able to continue working to help others. Okay, so let's pause here and do some meditation. I thought we could do one of the meditations from Thupten Jinpa's book. And this is one of the meditations that they use in their compassion training program. Oh, sorry. So this is a meditation on loving kindness. So as we said before, loving kindness and compassion are very similar. They're kind of like two sides of a coin, and they assist each other. So if we can have more loving kindness, we can have more compassion, and vice versa. More compassion enables us to have more loving kindness. Okay. So make yourselves comfortable. And as before, do your best to sit with a straight back, but at the same time, let your body be as relaxed and free of tension as possible. And start by taking a few deep breaths, breathing in slowly, deeply, pausing for just a moment, and then breathing out slowly. Let the breath go out slowly, releasing any tension you may have in your body. So do that 3 times, 3 deep breaths, and then go back to normal breathing. So continuing to breathe in a natural way, bring to mind a person who you feel affection for. So it could be a relative, a child, or sibling, or parent. Just a simple kind of affection, not a complicated one where maybe you have some feelings of aversion or hurt or lust. So just simple, natural human affection. So you may have many people towards whom you have such feelings, but just choose one of those people. It could also be an animal, a pet, dog, or cat. Try to have a mental picture of this person or being. You could imagine them as if they were right there in front of you. But if it's difficult to visualize, don't worry about that. It's enough just to have the thought of that person or being in your mind. And then just be aware of how you feel, what kind of feelings arise in your heart. Heart meaning your emotional state, heartfelt feelings you have for this person. So if feelings of warmth and tenderness and affection arise in your mind and your heart, then stay with those feelings. Try to hold on to them. But if no feelings arise, that's okay too. Don't worry about that. Just try to stay with the thought or the image of that person or being. And now say to yourself the following phrases. You can repeat them once or twice or 3 times, slowly, silently in your mind, focusing on that person or being. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be healthy. May you find peace and joy. Now do it one more time. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be healthy. May you find peace and joy. Now imagine that from your heart comes light, warm, radiant light, like the light of the sun. The light represents all your feelings of caring, love, affection. Imagine the light going to this person or being, goes right into their heart and fills them completely, bringing them happiness and peace. Relieving their unhappiness, their suffering. And now feel a sense of joy or rejoicing that you have done this practice, generated these positive thoughts and feelings and sent them to this person or this being and fill them with joy. So feel joyful about what you've done. Okay, so you can come out of the meditation and open your eyes. Okay, so that's giving you an idea of one kind of practice you can do to increase your positive feelings towards another person. And traditionally in Buddhism, it's recommended that we start cultivating thoughts of loving kindness and compassion with people that we find easy to like, easy to have those feelings for. And, spend some time doing that. And then gradually we can move on to people who are a little more distant from us, like strangers, people we don't know very well. We don't really like them, but we also don't hate them. Then gradually, when we get more familiar with the practice, we can start working on the difficult ones, the people we find annoying, irritating. So trying to feel love and compassion for those people right from the beginning would be very difficult. we might give up because we can't do it. So if we work on it gradually this way, from the easier ones to the more difficult ones, then there's more chance of success. So let's stop there and have a 5-minute break. And then we'll resume after 5 minutes.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. I'm going to turn off.
Je vais juste vérifier que la traduction en français, en fait, tout le monde entend bien. I'm just checking that the translation is okay for the French people.
Are we ready to begin again? I'm ready. I don't know if everyone is back. So I saw that one of the questions that was sent from last night was, what is the difference between compassion and attachment? How do we know if the compassion that we feel is mixed with attachment or not? So this is a good question. I was planning to talk about it later. I'll talk a little bit about it now. Attachment, the attachment we have for other people and, and beings like pets and so on, is usually mixed with self-centeredness, with our own ego and our desire for our own happiness and our own pleasure. And as long as we're human beings and we're not enlightened beings, we're not Buddhas or highly accomplished beings, it's only natural that we do have attachment. Attachment is just a natural part of living beings. But according to Buddhism, attachment is a state of mind that is a cause of suffering. And it's something we need to free ourselves from if we want to progress along the spiritual path and attain higher states of mind, such as nirvana and enlightenment. So it's an obstacle to our spiritual practice and our spiritual development. But attachment is also a cause of problems just in our everyday life. Because if we have attachment, we're not always able to have what we want, right? Attachment feels, I want this. And sometimes we're not able to get the thing that we want. And then we can get frustrated, angry, depressed, and so on. So that's one of the faults of attachment. Attachment causes us to cling to people and want them to be there when we want them to be there. And we want them to do what we want them to do. It's almost like we want to control the other person, not give them space and freedom to be themselves and do what they want to do. So that can lead to problems as well. If the person wants to do something other than what we want, and then, we can get angry and upset about that. So if we look at the arguments and the quarrels and the conflicts that we have with other people, such as our family and friends, if we examine why that happens, we might find attachment is at least part of the problem. So it is a problem. And my guess is in our relationships with our close friends and family and so on, there's probably a mixture, a combination of both love and attachment, compassion and attachment. Those two are probably mixed up. And one way we can notice the difference between the two, love and compassion on the one hand and attachment on the other, is if we ask ourselves, who am I most concerned about? Whose concern is predominant in my mind? Is it me? Is it myself, my needs, my wishes, what will bring me happiness? Or is it the other person? And if our main concern is me, like, I want you to stay home tonight and be there with me and make me happy and not go out with your friends, then that's attachment. On the other hand, if we think about the other person and realize that they want to go out with their friends and they want to do things with their friends that will bring them happiness, Yeah, and that's more important to us than our own happiness. Then that's more compassion and love. Now, this is just a great simplification of something which is actually very complicated, because there could be a lot of other factors involved. You know, like maybe this person's just going out every single night of the week and never staying home with us. So then we may need to have some discussion with them, you know, talk about it. But that's just a very rough way of differentiating compassion and love on the one hand, and attachment on the other. Attachment tends to be more about me, what I want, what I need, what's good for me, as opposed to what's good for the other person. So we can talk about that more later, but that's just a brief answer to that question. So I would like to go on now and look at the next point of the outline, which is the benefits of compassion. Because compassion, according to Buddhism, compassion is something that we can cultivate, grow, have more of, and that's a very important part of the Buddhist path. But also even for people who are not following the Buddhist path, but want to have more compassion and need, maybe in their work, like if they work in the healthcare profession, they need to have more compassion. And it is possible to do this. It's impossible to grow our compassion, to increase our compassion, to have more compassion. But that does require some energy. We do have to make some effort. It's not something that's going to happen just by wishing it. We have to put energy into training ourselves to have more compassion. I mean, it's simple. It's similar if you want to become a musician. You want to play the guitar or the piano or the violin or something. You can't expect that you can just pick up the instrument and start playing without learning how to do it and practicing it and improving your skill. You have to put time and energy into practicing, training, and then you can get better and better. Yeah? So it's similar with these mental qualities like compassion and love. We need to learn how to cultivate them, and we need to put time and energy practicing, training ourselves to have them. And so if we can understand the benefits of compassion, if we can see that this will be a good thing, if I have more compassion, then we'll be more inspired. We'll have more enthusiasm or energy to spend this time and energy. Okay, so I'll start with the ones mentioned in A Fearless Heart, Thupten Jinpa's book. And so my understanding is this is like Western psychologists, researchers have actually done research into compassion. And when I heard about this some years ago, I was amazed. I was just, wow, the West has come a long way. I think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this wouldn't happen. Yeah, you wouldn't find Western researchers wanting to investigate compassion and find out more about compassion. So it's just amazing that they're even doing this. So anyway, they have done research on compassion, and they came up with these benefits. So these benefits are supported by research, and you can read more about it in his book and probably other books as well. So one benefit, the first one mentioned, is we will benefit more from others' kindness. So that means that if we ourselves can have more compassion and more kindness in our mind and our heart, then when other people try to show us kindness and compassion, we will actually be able to receive it. So I think what happens sometimes is, you know, sometimes people want to be kind to us, helpful to us, you know, want to show us kindness and affection, but sometimes we are closed to it. It's like we shut ourselves off, close ourselves off to that. And so we're not able to receive their kindness. And that's probably very frustrating for them. Maybe we've had that experience ourselves. When we try to show kindness and compassion to somebody, we really, really care and really want to be kind and helpful to this person, but they kind of, it's like, no, no, don't come near me. Animals do that sometimes too. Here in the monastery, we have 4 cats, and only one of the cats really likes being treated with affection. The others are like, stay away from me. So people try to pick them up and hold them, and they yeah, so it's kind of frustrating when you want to show some kindness and compassion and the other person or the other being doesn't want to receive it. But it's also for ourselves. Yeah, if somebody wants to show us kindness and compassion, we probably need it. We probably could benefit from it. Yeah, to open ourselves up and allow that kindness and then compassion and love to come in. Yeah, so closing ourselves off to that is not good for us. I mean, we do need it. Human beings do need kindness and compassion. It's healthy, just as we need food and water, you know, to nourish our body. We need kindness and compassion to nourish our mind. Otherwise, we feel lonely, we feel disconnected from others, and so on. And that's not good for our health. I've heard research that finds that people who are lonely and isolated and unconnected with others, they have more health problems and they have shorter lives. There's actual research showing that. So on the other hand, if we can be open to and connected with other people and have good relationships with other people, that's good for our health and our ability to live long. So having more compassion in ourselves will help us towards that. And the second benefit is getting the helper's high. So this is an expression that I think has become used in English. I don't know if you have such a thing in French, but they find that when people help others, they naturally feel better. They naturally feel more happy. And they find that there's actually more endorphins, this kind of, I don't know, hormone or chemical that's released by the brain, and it goes into the body and makes you feel good, makes you feel happy. So endorphins are released by our brain when we are engaged in feeling compassion and behaving in a compassionate way. So there's actual, you know, scientific physiological basis for this, and they call that the helper's high. Yeah, you actually get high, happy when you help others. So that's, again, a benefit that we will experience if we are compassionate to others. I mean, compassion is really directed at others, but we will benefit from it as well. So that's really good, especially if you're feeling kind of depressed, feeling a bit down, again, isolated, disconnected from others. If you can do something helpful to others. I know that was difficult during the pandemic. I don't know the situation now in France, but like last year during the pandemic, people were supposed to stay at home. One woman that I know really had a hard time because normally she volunteers at an animal shelter, and she volunteers to help people who are dying, and yes, she had been doing a lot of volunteer work, and that gave her a lot of energy and a lot of joy, and she had to stop doing those things during the pandemic. So she had to stay at home alone and was having a really hard time. So I hope that has changed and people are able to get out and do things for others. But I also heard people were very creative and were doing things for others just by the telephone, calling up people who were maybe alone, lonely, isolated, just talking to them on the phone or connecting through the internet or social media. So there's always ways that we can help others and connect with others. Even just in our mind, like with meditation, just thinking, visualizing, imagining other people, sending them loving energy, compassionate energy, doing the practice of Tonglen, taking the suffering, giving others. So with meditation, you can do lots of things that will bring happiness and peace into your mind, even if you can't physically be with others. And the next point is feeling more useful, having a greater sense of purpose in life. So this is a problem for a lot of people. They kind of feel life is meaningless. I am worthless. So if you have thoughts like that in your mind and those keep running through your mind, and then naturally you're going to be an unhappy person and have a difficult life. Whereas training in compassion and increasing our compassion, being more compassionate, will enable us to see more opportunities to help others, to connect with others in a healthy way. And so then we'll feel more useful. We won't feel so useless, worthless, and have a sense that life is meaningless. The next point is less stress. So stress is something that can be harmful for health, physical health, as well as mental or emotional health. So it's been found that when people train in compassion and have more compassion, then they have less stress. Also, stress often happens because of excessive concern about oneself, being self-absorbed, worrying too much about me and my problems, my needs. If our mind is overly preoccupied with me and my needs and so on, then that is one of the causes of stress and other emotional problems. So when we train ourselves to think more about others and have these positive thoughts and feelings towards others and be more involved in helping others, naturally we're less concerned about me. We'll be less occupied with me and my problems and more focused on others. So that will reduce that stress. So one thing that happens with self-preoccupation is we have this expression in English, making a mountain out of a molehill. Do you have something like that in French? The idea is there's something very small, but you focus on it and worry about it and think about it again and again and again, and it can seem to grow and become huge. So this is what can happen with self-preoccupation. We have a problem, and it might be, we might think it's a big problem, but because of thinking about it and worrying about it and feeling bad about it so much, it can seem huge, and it's like the whole universe is just filled with my problem. And it may not be that bad or that big. We're making it bigger than it is. And when we think about other people, when we train ourselves to think about other people and the problems that other people have, then one thing that happens is we probably realize our problem isn't that big compared with other people's problems. Yeah, so it can reduce in size until we realize, wow, it's actually quite small. and then we can feel, hey, this isn't so bad. I can manage it. I can deal with it. Other people have much bigger problems, and maybe I can do something to help other people with their problems. Okay, so that's just one example of how being self-preoccupied can lead to stress and anxiety and a lot of sadness, whereas being more compassionate, focusing more on others can reduce that. Okay, so the next point says being less lonely and more connected with others. Okay, so that's, I think, easy to understand how that can happen, because if we are training ourselves to think more about others and understand others have problems, being concerned about their problems and wanting to help them, then again, we're focused more on others, concerned about others, and we'll connect more with others. And so when we connect more with others, naturally we will feel less lonely, isolated, and have problems like thinking nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, which probably isn't true. It's just our mind making up that story. And as I said before, this is actually good for our health. Loneliness, isolation, being disconnected with others has been found to be a cause of more health problems, more health issues, and even having a shorter life. In fact, I heard many years ago, they found that, you know, even people who have pets, who have a pet cat or a pet dog, I'm sure that's the case with many people in Paris. Many people have their little dogs and their little cats. So people who have pets have lower medical bills, they have fewer health problems, and live longer because they have another being to care about, another being to focus on rather than just themselves. And just that mental activity of thinking about another being, caring about another being, and the physical activity of taking care of that other being takes us out of ourself. And it's healthy, it's good for us. It's actually good for our health to care about others. Okay, the next point is kindness is contagious. So this is really wonderful. So the point here is that when one person does an act of kindness, other people observe that or hear about that, and then they will feel inspired to do an act of kindness. Excuse me. So you probably experienced this yourself. If you notice somebody doing something kind, like maybe even something simple like giving some breadcrumbs to some pigeons in the street. You know, lots of people do that in cities, feeding the pigeons. So if you see somebody doing that and you think, wow, what a nice thing to do. That person is so kind. The pigeons are so happy. And then that might inspire you to share some of your food with the pigeons or with a hungry cat in the street. Yeah. So this actually happens. People are inspired to do acts of kindness when they observe somebody else doing an act of kindness. And so then it's like a ripple effect. One person does an act of kindness, other people see that and they do an act of kindness. And then more people will see them doing an act of kindness, and that will inspire more. So more and more and more acts of kindness come even from just one act of kindness. So that's really good. That's good for both the people who are doing acts of kindness and the recipients, the ones receiving that kindness. Many people, many beings can benefit. And so the last point says, in short, we'll be happier and healthier. So even though compassion is explained as wishing others to be free of suffering. And so it's focused on others, caring about others, looking for ways that we can help others. So it's mainly focused on others. But if we can realize that we will benefit, it will benefit ourselves, our physical health, our physical well-being will be benefited, and our mental state will be happier. So if we can realize that, we might have more energy to work on cultivating kindness, compassion. So then that's from the Western perspective. And then there's some benefits from Mahayana Buddhism. So that's the kind of Buddhism we follow in the Tibetan tradition. And in Mahayana Buddhism, the ideal is that of the Bodhisattva. If that term isn't familiar to you, a Bodhisattva is a person who's totally dedicated to the well-being of others, totally concerned about all living beings, not just a limited number of beings, but all living beings without exception, and is completely focused on doing what will be beneficial for them, helping them have more happiness and less suffering. So that's a bodhisattva. So we all have the ability to become bodhisattvas. We can develop our minds and become bodhisattvas. And compassion is one very important element in that. So if we develop our compassion, that's one way of, or one factor for becoming a bodhisattva. So in Mahayana Buddhism, that's what we aim to do, to become a bodhisattva and then eventually become a Buddha. A bodhisattva is somebody who wants to become a Buddha, who wants to become fully awakened, fully enlightened, in order to benefit all beings. So in this form of Buddhism, then, compassion is important. And there's an explanation in one of the classic Indian texts called Entering the Middle Way by Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti is a great Indian master. And right at the beginning of this text, the text is actually about the Bodhisattva's path, the whole path of the Bodhisattva. And right at the beginning of the text, Chandrakirti pays homage to compassion. He praises compassion. And he says, well, I'll just talk about it. He says, it's important at the beginning of our practice. It's important in the middle of our practice. It's important at the end of our practice. So just a little bit of explanation about that. He uses the analogy of growing crops, like wheat or rice or barley. And when you want to grow crops, in the beginning, you have to have the seeds. You have to put seeds in the ground. And those are the basis from which the crops will grow. So he says, compassion is like the seed. So at the beginning of our practice on the Bodhisattva's path, we feel compassion for sentient beings. We realize there's a great deal of suffering in the world. We're very concerned about this. We want to do something about it. We want to alleviate suffering. We look for a way to do that. And if we encounter the Buddhist path, the Mahayana path, then we'll see, oh, this is something I can do to alleviate the suffering of the world. I can cultivate compassion, love, become a bodhisattva, and eventually become a Buddha. So compassion is like something that impels us at the beginning of our practice to start following the path. It's like the seed. And then in the middle, meaning as we are progressing along the path, it takes time, it takes energy to follow the path to enlightenment. So compassion is necessary while we are following the path. And in the analogy of crops, growing crops, compassion is compared to the water. So if you put seeds in the ground, but you don't water them, then they're not going to grow. Or they might grow a little bit and then they'll just die. They won't be able to reach the full potential of the crops. So we need to keep watering the seeds and the little sprouts for them to continue growing. So in a similar way, you know, we start off with some compassion in our mind at the beginning of the path, but we have to continue cultivating compassion, just like watering the seeds. We can't let our compassion dry up and die. We have to keep it alive in order for our mind to actually progress along the path and eventually reach Buddhahood. So it's important in the middle of the path, all the way as we're going on the path. And finally, at the end, so in the analogy of growing crops, the end is when the crops have become fully grown, fully ripened, ready to harvest and then turn into food for people. And in the spiritual path, the end is Buddhahood, the state of full enlightenment, Buddhahood. That's the goal that we are aiming for. So we reach that state of enlightenment, and that doesn't mean we retire and we just relax and take it easy and not work anymore. But when you become Buddha, when you become fully enlightened, you continue working for the benefit of all sentient beings. That was your whole reason for becoming enlightened. You want to help all living beings. So when you do become enlightened, because of this strong compassion and love for sentient beings, then you work continuously, like day and night, nonstop. You don't even take a break, but you don't need a break. You're beyond needing a break for yourself. You can just work continuously, tirelessly, day and night to benefit sentient beings. And this is because of the strength of compassion. So compassion then is important at the beginning of our practice and all the way along as we are continuing to practice, and even at the end when we become fully enlightened. So that's quite a beautiful teaching. So I thought to stop at this point and have little groups to discuss these benefits that I just went through. So you will be given the chance to be in a small group, a breakout group with just a few other people. And I hope you know how to do that. I think Arnaud will explain. And so what I would like you to discuss with each other is which of these benefits do you find most interesting, appealing, inspiring? Okay, if you can remember the benefits, just the ones that stand out in your mind. And why? Why did you feel that benefit was kind of grabbed your mind, inspired you? So you can share that with each other. And then, if you still have time, are there any other benefits that you may have noticed from your own experience of compassion or observing compassion in others? Anything that wasn't mentioned here? Any other benefits? So just, I think 10 minutes probably is enough, 10 minutes for the breakout.